happy weekend to all for those who actually listen to us as soon as we come out. This is the XP Billionaires podcast. You've got Rafe Thegrum here. I've got Sky and Irene with me as always. Irene, how are you today?
Not bad, not bad.
Excellent, excellent. And Sky, how are you feeling at this point?
Surviving.
That's good. That's good. We're getting there. That's great. All right. Well, you know what? Let's just get into this one right off the bat. I think we've got a lot of meat to talk about here today. So in the wake of E3, we there's nothing but talk about the Final Fantasy VII remake at this point. It's a full on ground up remake and reimagining of probably one of the most well-known RPGs of all time. I said most well-known, I did not say best, Sky. So
Thank you.
you're welcome. And on top of that, we've seen a lot of games that have gotten either, just a typical graphical remaster, such as the first two Trails of Cold Steel games, which I've been playing, The Last Remnant, Residents of Fate. But we've also had, some other ground up remakes like the Yakuza series with Yakuza Kiwami and Kiwami 2, which has been also fantastic. So it got me thinking. I figure between the three of us, we could probably come up with a couple of games that we'd like to see both get just, a little bit of a graphical update. But at the same time, there's some games that I'm sure we would love to see just remade 100% with, some new mechanics, fixing whatever bugs they've had in the past. So I figured we'd talk about that this week. I don't know. It sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. So I think so. What we're gonna do is we're gonna talk one remaster and one remake between the three of us. Simple, straightforward, and if you can explain what kind of changes you'd like to see with those updates, that helps too. So, Sky, I know you're still not feeling overly great, so let's get you taken care of. Let's get your choices out of the way. So, what is your choice for just a graphical remaster?
I would like to see the Batten Kaitos duology remastered on the GameCube. They're some of the most beautiful games I've ever seen, despite being on the GameCube. There's so much rich, loving detail in these hugely complex environments. A remaster would just help infinitely to sharpen all that up, make it easier to see, and particularly with the first game, it needs better audio. It needs a redub. Like, there's something about the English audio quality in the first game that's not very good at all. If they can redub it, and also having the Japanese voice track too would be great. That should be the standard. And you do those things, and you have two really amazing games. These are the same people who made classics like, the Xenosaga series, the Xenoblade Chronicles. Like, let's get these lesser known games by them out there to modern audiences, and I think they would be really well received.
No, I think you're absolutely right on that. Those two, like I'll be honest, I was not a big fan of the game, the combat mechanics of Batten Kaitos Origins. However, the first game, Eternal Wings, was superb. There, that's not to say that Origins was a bad game. It just the combat system didn't feel great for me. Just it was a little too fast, but and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it.
I mean, I feel the same way about the combat in Origins, but many people actually prefer the streamlining of Origins. I just personally feel they took it a little too far, particularly by condensing it all, like the card-based combat, to one deck as opposed to every character having their own deck like they did in Eternal Wings.
Yeah, I definitely like that a lot more too. I completely agree with you. But yeah, no, those would be great to see just livened up and make that color really pop. That being said, let's move on. Let's move on. What game do you believe needs a full ground up remake?
Kodelka for the PS1. It begs for a remake. In that era of games, excellent art and detail only went so far in the primitive 3D of that era. I mean, Kodelka was about as good looking a game as you could reasonably expect a 3D PS1 game to look. But it's still blurry, it's still hard to see what you're doing, particularly in dark environments like the ones in Kodelka. I mean, it is like I've talked about Kodelka before, and it is basically like a RPG slash survival horror hybrid thing. It's a strange game. It's the precursor to the Shadow Heart series. But if
I'm surprised that you played anything that had survival horror elements to it, just in general, but cool.
Yeah, it doesn't lean too hard on like the things I really hate about horror, like jump scares and stuff like that. So I was okay with it. There was a little bit of gore in one scene, but overall it wasn't too bad. It was more about, you're in this creepy old monastery with ghosts and monsters, and and it was all very much handled like combat was very much RPG in terms of random encounters, though the battles have this sort of strat light nature to them. But also there's no shops. You survive entirely based on the stuff you pick up. Which brings me to my first point about Kodelka. It'd be so much easier to get through this journey if you could see what you were doing better. So if you rebuild it from the ground up, all the details are really nice and sharp. You can see it's easier to see distinct items, what they are, pick them up. That would make it a lot easier. It might also make it a lot scarier because, detail is less blurry. And I'm suggesting this despite the fact I know that it might make it too scary for me if they remade it, but
it's funny. Just like this guy's like, remake this game so I can nope out of playing it because it's too scary now.
well, yeah, I know that's a risk.
Yes, don't worry. Just Sky's thinking, remake it so I can make Irene play it on Twitch so I can just close the stream if it gets too scary.
Yes. The thing is, the original's only about 10 hours long. So there's plenty of room to flesh things out, go into more detail about the characters and whatnot, and even expand the environments if they wanted. Furthermore, if they added a sort of, what's coming to mind is turbo mode, where you could speed up the combat animations and such, that would really help because the combat is really slow. And while I didn't mind it necessarily, I know it bothered a lot of people, including Rafe. And I think if they just simply sped it up a bit, that would end a lot of people's complaints with the combat. The combat wasn't bad; it was just slow.
No, that's correct, and you're right. I did have a problem with that. The combat actually reminds me a lot of the Trails games, in terms that you've got a little bit of movement, range is an issue, that kind of thing. Yeah. I think they'd be able to speed it up just with the remake, just doing it as a proper remake anyway. But yeah, adding that turbo mode like the Trails games have been doing, I think that'd be a great idea.
Yeah, it would be hugely helpful. And and like I said, there's so much more they could do with it, and because it is this huge monastery, and if they could give us more to interact with, they could give us more cutscenes, they could get into the characters more, and I would really like that because the characterization it's there, but it's not as good as I would like. You don't get to know the characters well enough. And they are interesting people, so I would like to know more about them. And maybe it would be a chance to build in more ties with Shadow Hearts. That would be really cool. So, yeah, I think it's a prime example of a game that could be remade into something a lot better.
I definitely agree. Yeah, that's an excellent choice. Well, let's meet me in the middle, and we'll talk about my choices at this point. So, for my remaster, I I was having a lot of trouble thinking about this one. So, my choice has I think I'm happy with my choice, and I am choosing the very first Digimon World game for the PS1. This was an awesome game. It blended an RPG with, the old school Digimon virtual pet keychains, which we own a new version of, by the way, and they're so much fun to have. At the same time, we've had several sequels come out that have kind of improved the graphics in and of themselves. We've got Digimon World Next Order, which came out recently for the PS4 in the last year or so. That was a lot of fun. But just going back to the roots and just doing a graphical touch up of the original environments that were and the Digimon designs from that original game, I think it would actually it would be a lot of fun to go back and play. Just having the original, I don't know, it just cleaned up the environments. They did a really good job with the environments as they were, but crisp them out, make them a little nicer, and it would be great. I mean, I would love to see them just, if it was a proper remaster and port and they just wanted to add more content, like the original game only had two mega level Digimon, and they were Hercules Kabuterimon and Phoenixmon. So really nothing all that interesting in my opinion.
Those are
So
really random choices.
they were absolutely, and yeah, I'd love to see them just add a few more. They don't have to change anything in terms of the mechanics. The mechanics have been pretty much the same as they've kind of progressed them through with other sequel titles that have come out. So I'm not really worried about that. Just like, yeah, like this was before, like I think these were almost even before the original Digimon anime came out. So they weren't really doing much with anything above ultimate level Digimon. So I think that was really all that was available in the old keychains as well. At least in the very very first releases of them.
Oh,
So yeah, that's my take on just what would just get a nice quality of life update. That that would be it. As for my remake, I know I argued with you a little bit this before we recorded Sky, but I still think that a proper full on remake of this one I think would be a real huge benefit. For that one I've chosen Skies of Arcadia or Skies of Arcadia Legends for those of you who've played the port to the GameCube. Now I know it got a touch up when it got ported to the GameCube, but I felt like it wasn't enough. And as much as I love this game, I thought it was a fantastic game. We fought tooth and nail to get a copy of this one. That's a story for another day, but let me tell you, it was a huge negotiation trying to get a copy of this. So here's my reasoning for doing this. The game itself was very very great in terms of the way its aesthetic. It was beautiful, but obviously you want to get a much more colorful graphical update to it. And there's no doubt about it. Any touch up on that would just make something great even better. But there's more you could do. Like obviously we've talked, Sky's talked about dual audio before. Absolutely we should do that. And even just getting a new dub going on, bring back the actors, just clean up the dub because it the sound quality was also not great at the time, which is unfortunate, but it was really good. But
if I remember what I read about it correctly, it was one of the downsides of the GameCube port because I believe the audio was actually supposed to be better in the original version.
oh, okay.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Maybe something happened when they were doing the porting.
Yeah.
Not sure, but that's what I remember reading about.
Mm.
Yeah. Now, some of the things that have made me decide to make this like a full-on remake. First off, the movement controls when in towns or traveling dungeons, you still needed to use a button command to go into a building. The You couldn't easily turn on an angle or to like go forward on an angle. You had to kind of actually turn left or turn right before you could move. It was almost almost felt like tank controls in some ways, but it wasn't.
Oh,
So
yeah, I
it
was gonna say that sounded like tank controls.
it was very, very close in that regard. So I would love to see them be able to just update kind of the movement area that's available, your movement controls. That would be huge. Some general quality of life improvements would be nice when it comes to airship travel, especially when you're hunting discoveries. I remember there were some situations where I had to literally be on top of a specific point or below a specific point to find said discovery. It, it was really, really nitpicky, which is, which is part of, searching for stuff, don't get me wrong. But when you're in an airship, I feel like you have to have a little bit of leeway. You need to have a better window to be able to identify something you're looking for there. So I think that would have been something I'd love to see them update. And then when it comes to the graphical update, it also means that with special abilities, especially like final skills, would you could really kind of jazz up and go balls to the wall, make them really awesome. Like I remember really enjoying Vice's Pirate's Wrath skill. It was really powerful, super busted, but at the same time, like if they could just touch that up and make it look a little more over the top, I think it would be phenomenal to see. Just adding these extra animation bits would it would just make it feel so much more it would feel so much more anime. I think that's the best way to put it.
It would be nice to have the graphics be remade in a more mature style, because everyone's sort of stunted and blocky.
Well, yeah, that it would be nice. Yeah, so like if they touched all of that up, like the character models needed a good touch up. We're talking about a Dreamcast game originally, so I mean I understand where it's coming from, but it just screams for that remake. Like Sega, like you guys have been doing a lot of really good stuff lately. This would be the pinnacle to your remakes right now. I really recommend doing it because I think you not only would be able to bring a wonderful tale of Sky Pirates to a new generation of players, but even I would want to go back and play it again, and I would buy this game all over.
Yeah, it did like I haven't played it yet, but I watched some of your playthrough and it did some really interesting things. In terms of like the airship combat and all that stuff.
I think one of the things I loved the most about this game was not even the airship combat, which was amazing, by the way, but the regular person-to-person combat where you could change the element of your weapon on the fly
Oh,
just
that's
to
cool.
experiment and do extra to be able to see if you can determine elemental weaknesses and do extra damage. That was one of the coolest things I had seen in a game in a long time. And the fact that it also changed the color of your weapon while you were doing it, like it was a beautiful touch.
Yeah. It had an extraordinary amount of detail for a game of that age.
It absolutely did. So that's why it deserves a full-on remake. That's hands down, no argument. Yeah, so that's my selections here. So we're coming on to Irene now. So let's start with your remaster. What needs a touch up?
Xenosaga series from the PS2 era. I'll start off by saying those games are still gorgeous because they made the smart decision to go with a style rather than for realism, which means that, visually they've aged well. Um However, I think they could benefit, especially the second one could benefit from some quality of life improvements for sure to that combat system, which oh my god, the second one was a bit clunky in terms of its combat. I remember trying to beat the final boss, and there was really only one way to do it, and you could not screw up a single turn or you would wipe. And it was like 3 boss fights, and it was an hour. Like it was not a good setup.
Well, yeah, this is what we were talking about in our what I was talking about in our boss fights episode just recently. Uh, like it was an absolute shit show for those particular fights, and in the other 2 games they were fine. There was nothing wrong with their final bosses or any of their bosses for that matter.
I will also say they could do a few quality of life improvements on the first and the third installments, because I remember the first installment did this really bullshit thing where boss fights had regular drops and rare drops. You only get one run at the boss. Why the fuck does it have a rare drop? Like, what? And I actually managed to get the rare drops, just like I lucked out and I didn't have to farm for them. And because I got those rare drops, I basically broke the combat system for the first Xenosaga. Because what they would do is they would give me an additional like action, like an additional stock point each turn, and allow me to unleash 2 tech attacks per turn. So eventually I was attacking like 3 times and then attacking, like I basically never had to ease off the gas pedal in order to unleash like absolute fuck all over my enemies, which was amazing. But without them, that last section might have been like, it was still hard. Like I didn't exactly walk all over the last boss. So I think they could have done with a bit of fine-tuning of some of their combat. Also, maybe break up a few of those long cutscenes. Like, they're beautiful, and they're extremely interesting. But, like, add a save point or a checkpoint or something so that, you can get up and walk away if you have to. Because I remember some of them were really long, like a half hour to 45 minutes. So some more modern quality of life improvements, like being able to like save anywhere or break up some of those cutscenes with like checkpoints or save points. I remember finishing the game being like, yes, I'm done the first game, and I'm still sitting there 20 minutes later. I'm like, what the fuck? Just be over. This is all really cool, but like, I need you to be over now. I have shit to do.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, the pause section would be really good for that. But yeah, I definitely want to see the remaster just for the sole purpose of having a set of the games again. Just I regret trading them in now, and now they're just, like stupid expensive.
What's the thing, right? Like the ability to have, even just the ability to have them on a modern console would be huge because, as I'm sure you're aware, the PS4 uses a suspend feature, right?
Mhm.
So the suspend would actually enable you to just sort of like pause those cutscenes, walk away, and come back and jump right back in. So that would actually take care of that pretty easily.
Yeah,
But yeah, so I'd really like to see them on modern consoles. Just like give them a bit of like a graphical touch up. Perhaps take out some of the localization weirdness that they put in the original PS2 version. Like if I remember correctly, in the third game, spoiler alert, in the Western version, Albedo like blows up his whole fucking head with like psychic magic powers. And in the Japanese version, he just shoots himself in the head. And I would argue that shooting himself's actually not as traumatizing. I don't know why they decided to do that.
yeah.
There were some strange localization decisions made in those games that I think were like, oh, this will never suit the sensibilities of a Western audience, and they just ended up making it more terrifying somehow.
I think in general they would benefit from standardizing a few things across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know you said remaster, but honestly, like the leap from Shion from the first game to the second game, it's like she doesn't even look like the same person.
This is true. Yeah, so standardization of the character model across all 3 games might not be a bad idea.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I actually really missed her glasses in the second game. They took them away, and I was like, no, no, give me my nerdy woman who like slams her hand on the desk and screams at her boss that he's being a tool bag. I actually really liked Xion from the first game because she was a bit of a badass in her own way, and then she sort of fizzled a bit. So it would be nice to have her like a consistent person across all 3 games as well.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, then let's talk about your remake. What do you want to see remade?
Well, there was really only one choice for this, and it was Legend of the Dragoon for the PS1. So it was a good title. It wasn't exactly like a little known title. It's a fairly popular one, and it recently was ported, like digital ports over to the PlayStation, like PlayStation 1 on PS4 or whatever, you know. But it's from a story perspective, I loved the story of Legend of the Dragoon. It was tight, it was solid, you had great characters, and a combat system that I have not seen anything like it since. Like, I had this natural tendency that this game actually ingrained in me to hit the X button when, like, the moment that the blow lands. Because in that game, that's how you would, like, do combat. Your physical attacks were always super viable because you created these huge combos as you went through. So I really liked that mechanic. You'd have this turn-based system where you could, like, almost have, like, this action combat interlude whenever you'd run up and attack something. And they were really cool. Like, I remember one of my favorite characters was actually Albert, the spear wielder, because he was like a goddamn acrobat with that spear. Like, he'd plant it in the ground and spin around it and kick shit in the face, and then do a backflip, pull the damn thing up, and then flip forward and, like, slam down with his whole goddamn weight on it. Like, it was really interesting watching him. Like, it was interesting watching your characters nail these combos. And the more they did it, the more, like, basically transformation, or I think it was SP, spirit points they got back. And the more SP they got, the more they would level up their Dragoon forms, which would just get better. And it would also fill a bar, which would allow you to turn into your Dragoon form and then unleash all sorts of cool magical attacks on shit for a few turns. Like, it was a really, really solid game. Plus, one of the best physical attackers you had in the game was Rose. And it was very unusual for the PS1 era where you'd have a playable female character hand out that level of physical whoop-ass. And I really liked that. I really wish that they would get like a full ground-up remake. Because even in some places they had some voice acting, but not a ton. And it would be great to have like a fully voice-acted game.
Also, it's a PS1 game and 3D. That says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah, the character models were I think it was late PS1 timing. I can't quite remember. Like mid to late PS1 era game, and it still had the 2D backgrounds with the 3D character models, which is fine. The backgrounds and the environments were beautiful, but like in a lot of those kinds of games, it could be really challenging to figure out where the fuck you were going.
Yep.
And what was a door and what wasn't a door. Like there was some signposting that definitely could use could use some work. And also, if you're going to remake it, put in some combos for Shanna, please. And the Archer Dragoon. Like, why did she only get like a single attack? That was boring. I never had her in my party because of it. But of course, she had the best healing magic. So like, basically played that game without a healer every time because I was like, well, here's the thing. I'm like, you basically needed to max out everyone's combos, like level them up to max level, all of them, in order to unlock their final combo, which was like the best combo. Best damage, best efficiency, best everything. So Shanna didn't have any, which meant she was filling up a valuable slot for me to be training somebody else's combos up, which meant she didn't get used. And while she wasn't my favorite character, I think you could have done some pretty cool Archer combos there. Like have her do some like trick shots and shit like that. It felt like such a waste.
Yeah, it does sound like a missed opportunity.
Right? She was the only one who didn't do that. And I was like, really? Really? This entire game is built up around, like, comboing your physical attacks, and she doesn't do it.
That stinks of something getting cut last minute.
Well, here's the thing. Even when they replace her, like, as a player character, God, I think it was the third disc, she gets replaced with a different archer because her Soul of the Silver Dragoon actually rejects her. That character that they replaced her with basically controlled the same way Shanna did. And she was like a fucking trained knight.
Hmm.
So I was like, ah, God, again, like another missed opportunity to do something cool. And it just meant that, like, I just never had time for them. And I would have really liked to have used, like, the Silver Dragoon had some really good abilities, and I just never used them. And it was kind of sad. I
Fair.
got by with, like, Rose and, oh God, was it Maru? Yeah, Maru. Because they had some healing abilities, but neither of them were as strong as the Silver Dragoon. I could have, like, really used it in some of those fights. Also, there were some really clever mechanics in some specific fights, like when you had the dragon sealing staff. A few fights where you had to use that. Holy shit! It did not dawn on me the first time I went through that fight that if I used dragoon form, I would basically turn into tissue paper. Didn't go well for me. So, yeah, I think that game would definitely benefit from a ground up remake, and it was a solid story with really interesting mechanics that I think they could preserve for sure, but, like, quality of life improvements here and there. Tune up the graphics, really make it rewarding for, like, visually rewarding for the player. Because, like, back then, you only had the one angle to play with behind the character, right? The camera was always positioned behind whichever character was attacking. Well, now you could easily, like, swing that camera around for that last combo step to make it something really visually impressive. It was a great game, and it deserves a remake.
Alrighty, well that's all the time we've got for this week. Everything you mentioned, or that we've mentioned in this case, are fantastic choices, and I can't agree more with any of them. So yeah, if you developers are listening, Sega, Sony, whoever has been involved in whatever we've been talking about, Monolith Soft, please, take heed that we want more of these, and we will give you money to buy these when they come out.
Right?
Very important. All right. Well, that being said, as always, we'd love to hear from you guys. So let us know what you guys want to have remade or remastered. You can reach out to me on Twitter at BillionairesXP, or you can hit me up on Instagram at RayFegram. And don't forget to check me out on Twitch every Wednesday night at 7 at RayFegram. Sky, whereabouts are you?
I'm at Skyknight XP on both Twitter and Twitch. I stream on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. EST.
All right. And Irene, where can everyone find you?
I am at irogue_XP on Twitter and Twitch, and I stream Thursday nights at 7 p.m.
Awesome. And as usual, guys should see the transcript for this episode coming up in a few days, courtesy of Hannah Bard, our XP hobo. And that'll be up on our website at xpbillionaires.wordpress.com. And finally, I know I say it all the time, we love doing everything that we do here at the XP Billionaires. And if you love it as much as we do, if you can, please support us with a donation on Coffee. That's coffee.com/xpbillionaires. All right. Well, that's going to be us for this week. We'll talk to you next week. And if you're anything like me, you'll just keep gaming. All right. We'll see you around. Take care.
Bye!
Bye.